Welcome to the BrightInsight Digital Health C-Suite series. I'm Jamie Burgess, Senior Vice President of Marketing at BrightInsight. Joining me today from NASDAQ's broadcast studio at the 42nd Annual JP Morgan Healthcare Conference is our very own CEO, Dr. Kal Patel. Kal, thank you for being here.
A real pleasure, Jamie.
So it's been a crazy couple of days at JPM so far. We talked to a number of tech experts, life sciences executives last night at our event we hosted. You've been in back-to-back meetings. So let's jump right in and hear about what you've been learning. So what do you think are the biggest opportunities for AI and generative AI when it comes to life sciences companies?
Yeah, I think that's definitely a key theme of the conference, and I think the opportunities are actually pretty expansive and pretty large. So if you take even just the life cycle for pharma, let's just start with R&D. I think we're already seeing a lot of Gen AI drive value in multiple ways. Number one, in terms of how do you discover and identify targets that can be meaningful that were not discovered before. Secondly, we're seeing a lot of work around how do you actually design drugs that are essentially more druggable, meaning better efficacy, lower risk of side effects. And then thirdly, sometimes underplayed, but I think what will ultimately drive a lot of value is in form of efficiency and speed, right? So if you can get drugs to market faster, then obviously that makes them more valuable. And if you can do it more efficiently, then obviously that's going to reduce your costs and let you do more. So I think there's a lot there in R&D. If we switch on to the other side of the value chain in terms of the commercial side, I think the opportunity here is actually very, very large, and in some ways maybe even as near term. So for example, on the marketing side of things, it's really could be a real big paradigm shift. So I think there's an opportunity to get reach with patients and physicians that historically have been hard to get to. And then to do that in a way where the content is actually much more personalized. So whether that's around marketing or education, but really speaking to what that individual needs to help them in their journey process. And then thirdly, to actually do that more efficiently. So actually ultimately with less cost, less resources. So I think you can do that on the marketing side, and then the equivalent of how do you really drive that on the sales side, right? So it's not about sales reps going away. It's about how do sales reps get much, much more effective by leveraging AI to help them be more efficient and more personalized.
And can you share at BrightInsight, how are we thinking about our Gen AI and AI strategy?
Yeah. So as you know, and many, others may know, our focus is really around the disease management side often with blockbuster pharma drugs. And so the question becomes, how do we help patients along that journey? And so as examples of some of the things we're doing, it really starts with how do you help them get much more personalized in terms of helping educate that patient on what they might need depending on where they are on their journey. That might be around better understanding their disease, maybe around how do you personalize helping them onboard onto therapy, right? Because a lot of therapies these days are complex, whether it's infusion, whether it's self-injection, or some other type of modality. So how do you really personalize and educate and support that patient through that piece? And then we can't forget ultimately around adherence and persistence, right? One of the biggest challenges for almost all pharma brands, regardless of therapeutic area, regardless of how the drug works, is that the patient will churn off and or be in a situation where they're skipping doses or missing doses. And how do you really, again, leverage the power of Gen AI to be able to predict churn and intervene or drive those nudges that are going to keep patients on therapy per what their own wish is and obviously what their healthcare provider's wish is for that patient.
So lots of nuggets in there in terms of the value for biopharma when it comes to disease management, incorporating digital technologies in Gen AI. What about the patients and providers, right? Ultimately, that's why we all do what we do. Yeah. What benefits do you think they'll see with these new technologies?
Yeah, I think from a patient perspective, I think about several, not to make this, I don't know if it's called alliteration, but, number one, I think about how do we give the patient confidence? Right, so how do you give them the information and support they need when they need it, which really instills a sense of ownership for them around the disease they're trying to manage, right? So I think this is one notion around confidence. The second for that is really around how do you make them be more compliant, right? I think a challenge that again, the majority of patients we just see in the data, and probably for most of us in our own personal experience, it's hard to stay compliant to most things in life, but certainly, some of the needs of our medications and healthcare. So how do you support them from a compliance perspective? And I think if you do those two things and drive that compliance, you drive that confidence, then you ultimately let them create data that's really around their own experience, and to do that in a way where the power of Gen AI not just drives that personalization, but also helps really take all that data and make it much, much more digestible and efficiently usable for an effective conversation with that HCP. So then you take all of those things and you now have more constructive conversations with your doctor or your healthcare provider. That I think then results in ultimately what our vision is, which is how do you help leverage the power of digital for patients to get to a better clinical outcome, right? And I think so along that entire value chain, we're already seeing it in how we're investing in our disease management solution and what it can do across that.
I love that. So confidence, compliance, more constructive conversations between providers and HCPs. That's a great way of thinking about it. So you're on the front lines having conversations with all of our customers, all the top life sciences companies from a prospect standpoint. What are these companies coming to BrightInsight for from a Gen AI standpoint? What is sort of on the tip of their tongues?
Yeah, I would kind of divide it up into two broader buckets. So there's the kind of the clinical oriented side, which is, hey, we have data, we have algorithms, we're trying to really develop basically these algorithm driven solutions that can solve a meaningful clinical problem, right? And so what we help them do is do that in a compliant way, right? So our key value proposition is how do you both deeply appreciate and execute against the requirements of privacy, security, regulatory, and quality, and do that at a global scale. So we can really take these digital or AI-driven innovations and turn them into software as medical devices that are AI-driven. So that's kind of one bucket, and then the other bucket is kind of what I reference is really around how do we do a better job of really helping their patients manage their disease. So really the disease management orientation that I talked about.
So going back to your first point there, compliance, it's critical. We talked to Stephen Ranjan at Roche yesterday about this topic. Can you speak to the criticality of having clinical validation when it comes to software as a medical device, when it comes to these new generative AI models, et cetera?
Yeah, it's a great question. So if you think about at the genesis of BrightInsight 5 years ago, privacy, security, regulatory, and quality were already why we started the company, because without meeting and really frankly often exceeding those requirements and the spirit of those requirements, you both have not just the reputational risk to the pharma company and our customers, but also obviously can have real risk to the safety of the patient. So that was always there foundationally to what I would call kind of traditional solutions. And now when you put the power and speed of AI and generative AI on top of that, I think it actually just amplifies both the risk, but also hence kind of the need to really partner and really focus somebody who has deep expertise there. And I think that's what we're hearing and seeing from our customers. Maybe just to add one thing, at our dinner last night, one of our customers, was talking about the massive investments they're making internally on Gen AI, and I actually asked them questions. So, given all that capability you have, why do you work with BrightInsight? And his response was, well, why would I go build an expertise that you guys have already deeply invested in and proven out and scaled, right? And there's so many applications for Gen AI, and that made perfect sense. He's going to do what others are not already doing to drive value in his business, but where he has a proven, trusted partner, why would he replicate that?
And so you talk a lot about value, and 2024 is going to be the year of proving value of a lot of the digital health technologies, these Gen AI technologies, et cetera. BrightInsight's investing a lot from a data standpoint, generating a lot of data for our customers. Can you share how that data can be used to drive value for the biopharma companies for their blockbuster therapies?
So value comes for them in multiple ways. So to your point, the first is how you build the products and then generate this data. And then what we're seeing is that data is driving insights in multiple ways. One is from a clinical perspective. So our customers are getting insights into how patients are using their products and what kinds of results they're seeing in the forms of whether it's captured in ePro or other clinical measurements. So one is getting that real world evidence in a way that's never existed before, right? Because traditionally you're going to claims data or EMR data, which is really capturing, a tiny fraction of what's really going on with that patient versus the other 99% of the time. So that's one, is bringing in clinical insights that haven't existed before. Secondly, it's around really understanding how patients are engaging and using these therapies, so that you can use that insight to drive things like much more personalized adherence, for example, really be able to engage the patient and support them with what they need at different points in their journey in a much more personalized way. And then I think we're beginning to see early signs of, can you actually predict churn, which is pretty powerful because, obviously if a patient's going to go off therapy, it's very relevant to know why, and is that the right decision for them or not? And a pharma company can try to use that information to support the patient, with the right decision at the right time.
Last question, I want to just double click on the real world evidence piece that you just mentioned. We're working on a number of digital products for gene therapies. How important will real world evidence capture be for all of these new gene therapies coming to market?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think the short answer is immensely, but what I'm seeing in the market is this, which is there's almost universal recognition on the importance of real world evidence for these therapies, because oftentimes, they're multi-million-dollar treatments. And so, the price point obviously is very concentrated, in a one-time treatment, and appropriately so, but then the burden of real world evidence, is going to be there to say, okay, why are we spending so much per patient? And so I think that recognition is there. What I haven't seen from the industry yet is the innovation on what's the right data and what's the right way to collect that data. So we see a lot of really expensive, and I would say still pretty clunky programs around registering patients, getting on the phone and trying to get data, trying to hunt down their medical records, et cetera, right? All these things that, frankly, we think are much more amenable through a digital relationship with the patient. A companion app that's both delivering value to the patient pre, during, and post therapy, and collecting the data, to show how that patient's journey is going, both from a quality of life perspective as well as a clinical perspective. And ultimately, what we want to help our customers show is that the economic value, right, of the dollar spent, the euro spent, the money spent, is actually yielding for society as well.
Well, thank you, Kal. As always, very inspiring, and sounds like a lot of opportunity for biopharma companies to capture real value with Gen AI and digital in 2024 and beyond.
Yeah, it'll be an exciting year. Thanks for having me, Jamie.